Hello everyone, Crystal Vision here, and welcome to a brand new update video about Toys for Bob. So something pretty significant has happened in the last day or so. I've come home from a work meeting. I've kept the suit on. We're gonna go super professional news desk style here. You know, got my coffee, and we're gonna talk about something massive. So basically, to cut a long story short, and then I'll go into the long story, Microsoft have entered a working agreement with Toys for Bob. Now, that was something that Toys for Bob had pegged or had openly discussed the possibility of just a few weeks ago. And now, according to sources, according to Jez Corden sources, there was a town hall meeting, if you will, with Microsoft people and such. And basically what's happened is they have now entered an agreement. So Jez is pretty reliable. He's an insider. He works for a number of publications, I believe, and he does a lot of self-published stuff as well. You can see stuff, a lot of what he talks about on Twitter. I believe he has a podcast as well. So this is a pretty reliable guy. This is like a friend of the spiral and crash scene, I would say. Someone that has sources. I'm fairly sure that he's talked to Canadian guy A as well. I'm pretty sure they've had communication. So sometimes things that he's said in videos or streams that may be, alluding to certain things. I personally reckon probably comes from him as well. So he's, a pretty well connected guy. So I'm going to read out some of the article, the WindowsCentral.com article. So what we're going to talk about here. So this is one of the headlines I find very, very, very pertinent. And I talked about this in the previous video. I kind of alluded to it, and I kind of want to talk to a couple people more about this. Actually, I probably want to talk to Canadian guy about this actually, because it's something that he's alluded to. It's something that you've just sort of heard rumbling about over the years, and it is the following. Sources have indicated to me previously that Toys for Bob's culture didn't gel well with Activision's oft restrictive corporate mandates, and they were excited for the opportunity to spin out as independent in agreement with Microsoft. When they initially spun out, they released a statement indicating they were confident they would work with Activision and Xbox in the future, and that they were exploring a possible partnership. It appears, or it seems, those talks have bared fruit. During a recent town hall meeting described to us by sources familiar with the event, a staffer asked the panelists about Toys for Bob, given that they're now going independent, separate from Microsoft and Activision. Toys for Bob's leadership was adamant about keeping the team together, and also about returning to the style of game the studio is known for. Microsoft referenced how they spun out Twisted Pixel in the past as an alternative option to shuttering studios. Matt Booty, yes, that very name, Matt Booty, now leading Xbox Games Content Division, reportedly said that an agreement has now been reached between Xbox and Toys for Bob for their first game as an independent studio. However, he stopped short of describing what exactly it would be, although he did say something on the lines of, and I'm paraphrasing, it will be similar to games Toys for Bob has made in the past. So, there's a lot to glean there. So the first thing is the sources indicating that Toys for Bob's culture didn't gel well with Activision's often restrictive corporate mandates. Now, this was clear to anyone that had any kind of press access or had been to Toys for Bob or anything like that. The way they weren't even allowed to talk about timelines in any way always seemed strange to me. Now, I could be wrong. That could be a Toys for Bob thing. That could just be like, we don't want to talk about when the game started. Now, me being cynical, my personal belief is that that was done because they did not want to, or Activision did not want to acknowledge how little time they actually had for Spyro Reignited Trilogy. Because it's an absolute joke that it started allegedly when it did start, which was like they basically had a year to do that game, a little bit longer. And in fact, we've never really been fully clear on it. They basically had to wait for the success of Insane Trilogy, which, by the way, was a shoe-in. Let's not do revisionist history here. A new Crash Bandicoot game or a Crash Bandicoot remaster was always going to do well. It was never in question. There was never not demand for that series to be revived. I don't want to hear people say, oh, they just didn't know whether it was going to be a success yet. They had to make sure. No, Spyro and Crash were always going to be successful because they've just on a absolutely micro level, my channel and other channels in the years, over the years, getting, thousands, hundreds of thousands of views of people, wanting these games, commenting, watching the originals, talking about it online, massive forums, it was Spyro and Crash were and are huge. Now, So you have that point, But then, just generally, it's like, other things about, the corporate mandates and stuff like that. Corporate mandates, that could mean anything, but that could also mean something like Vicarious Visions, which I talked about extensively. How Vicarious Visions, they made Insane Trilogy a success, an absolute success, bona fide success. Look at how my thumb bends, by the way. I'm like double jointed, see? People find that really strange. Yeah, so you had Insane Trilogy. There you go, I'm trying to hold it like this. Insane Trilogy. Then you have Tony Hawk's 1+2, Pro Skater 1+2. Both successes. This is like a gun. Both games successful. Millions of copies, like tens of millions, right? Like legit, I think between the two of them, definitely over 10 million. What do they get for that? They get their studio shuttered, right? They are punished for seemingly no reason. They have to go work on Diablo and stuff like that. Vicarious Visions do not exist as a studio anymore. They don't exist. Why? Because Activision said so. Right? Now, I'm not saying that Microsoft wouldn't do the same thing. I'm not saying that because, unfortunately, in a corporate landscape like this, a lot of the time you don't have a choice. These businesses exist to make money. Diablo is objectively successful. We don't, people on this channel, typically, I'd imagine I don't have a bunch of massive Diablo fans watching me. I've never played it. I've never had any interest, never had one iota of an interest. I've never looked at it, and I probably never will. It's just not on the agenda, right? But clearly, people like it. But that's just how it was. So, you have that, and then you have, for example, at some point, Toys for Bob working on COD Warzone, I believe. That was for a while. And that probably was, in part, was what delayed Wampa League, and all this other stuff. So this is a massive, massive deal. They've now struck the deal. Yeah, deal twice. So, it says Toys for Bob may be independent, but the fact they told fans to keep their horns on could be in reference to Spyro the Dragon, who enjoys a passionate fan base to this day. The humorous 3D platformers that Toys for Bob is often associated with are still owned by Microsoft, but for now have no dedicated developer. It seems entirely likely that Toys for Bob's first game out of the gate could be within the Crash or Spyro pantheon, but it also could be something else entirely, or completely, sorry. Perhaps Toys for Bob's very own IP. Perhaps long-suffering Banjo-Kazooie fans could get a glimmer of hope. Now, with Banjo-Kazooie, that sounds good in theory. However, apparently the rumor is with Banjo-Kazooie, it's being worked on for the last 2 years. So that's like the sort of the prevailing thought about that. So I don't know. I mean, that could be really cool. But I don't think it is that. I think that maybe one day we could see that, but I think that Microsoft have already got their own developers for that. But generally, this is where things get a little bit muddy, and it's intentionally muddy because it's what's going to happen. So the good, keep your horns on. Spyro, obviously a reference, to the original game. That's where people go, well, okay, they didn't confirm what game. They said the games would be similar to games of the past. Now, that could absolutely mean that they're working on their own independent 3D platformer with Toys for Bob, with Activision, Microsoft. Now, my question to you then would be, why would you simply go independent to then work on your own IP? I think that's one of those things where, yes, you could say, well, to get funding, but then again, they spun off. Obviously, they spun off to get away from Activision. I think, when I say obviously, that's just my own inference, but I think to get away from Activision, right, then you're now working directly with Xbox and Microsoft. I think that the only reason to do that, at least immediately, would be to work on an existing franchise. And then the keep your horns on is one of the many, many references that they have made over the years. Big, small. I think that's probably one of the bigger ones, actually. Of course, there's the "You Gotta Believe" thing early in the year. I think that's a smaller one, but this is like, a direct, when you make a direct reference to Spyro, after everyone's been hounding them for years about it in your goodbye letter when you spin off and become independent, that to me is no coincidence. And so that's where, like I discussed in the previous video, that's where the claws come out. That's where people get upset because they're like, well, how dare you, give us hope and stuff like that. And you as a YouTube channel should have a better standard of having any kind of belief of a new Spyro game. I've mostly stayed away from that in the last however many years, but I've become a little bit emboldened, a bit more emboldened in the last, couple months. Funnily enough, ever since, something bad happened, like when, there was layoffs, I've almost never been more confident about a new Spyro game. I think what's changed from when I thought it was coming at the Game Awards is that I realized and with the help of other sort of people talking about this too, that the timeline that I initially had or thought about a Spyro game is clearly behind. It's clearly not coming this year. Spyro 4, whatever you want to call it, is not coming out this year. I think maybe next year. That'd be awesome. That'd be fantastic. But I don't think so. I don't think it's coming this year, and that's okay. But it's funny. If let's say it did come out next year, it would be 7 years, or probably almost 7 years, or maybe 7 years, around that period since the last Spyro game, which is just kind of wild to think about. Kind of annoying. I wish it was before, but look, we can't. Look, that's the past. Is the past. The game's not out yet. It hasn't been announced, so what's the point in whinging about what we don't have? But yeah, I think that this is very, very exciting. I think that the fact that they have done this deal, it's one of those things where it's like it's an independently sourced exclusive, right? So we don't actually know for sure. There's a lot more that needs to come out. That we need to probably get an official agreement. In fact, my gut feeling is that we might not. There's a chance we don't actually get that for a while until the game is announced. I think that they're going to want to keep everything pretty close to the vest for now, which is fine. But yeah, I think that it will be. Don't need this on anymore. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I'm very excited. Leave a comment in the comment section. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think of the suit. I quite like it. This is a sports jacket. I got it for a job interview I did recently, actually. So yeah, I'm very happy with it. But yeah. So let me know what you think of the suit, the sports jacket. Let me know what you think of this whole news. Give me your cynicism, give me your optimism, copium, hopium, whatever, everything in between. And thank you very much for watching. Hope you like this cool little setup. We'll experiment with it. We'll see if we can keep using it in the future. I kind of wish it was aimed slightly more down, because it's a little bit up like that. I prefer it more looking down, but I'm using an iPad for this. So yeah, blame the iPad. All right, thank you guys very much for watching. Really appreciate it, and I'll see you very soon. Goodbye, mwah, good night, bye-bye.